Okay, I'd like to call the Joint Special School Building Committee to order. It's Thursday, November 21st, 2019. We're at the main Dunstable Elementary School in the Media Center, and it's 7 p.m. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman Dowd.
Present.
Alderwoman Wiltshire.
Here.
Alderwoman Malizagolia. Alderman Jetty.
Here.
Alderwoman Klee.
Here.
Ms. Oden.
Here.
Mr. Guarino. Ms. Raymond. Mr. Mosier. Ms. Porter.
Here.
We do have a quorum. We have 6.
Huh?
Do you want to call Bill in?
What did
Is
he,
there a phone?
did he want to? Or
He said he, yeah.
somebody wants to call him and,
Just be here.
Can anybody
How do we
call
do
him?
that?
I don't know.
I don't think they have a phone.
We don't have
You would
that?
have to use your cell phone and stick it underneath one of those.
somebody has his number. So Alderman Melissa Golia may be here later. She's at the planning board right now. Mr. Guarino and Ms. Raymond have other commitments, and I'm not sure if we'll have Mr. Mosier online or not. It's 7 p.m. Would the clerk please read the prayer, and would Alderman Wilshire lead us in the pledge?
Almighty God, we have the high honor and the serious duty to manage the educational affairs of our beloved city. Fill us, O God, with a spirit of unity and understanding which enables us to face our multiple problems with a serene mind, with justice and charity for all, so that any and all decisions made by us will always be for the betterment and greater happiness of our fellow citizens. So help us God.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. The minutes of the previous meeting. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of, what was the date of that?
Thursday, November 7th.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of
All right.
November 7th.
The motion on the floor is to approve the previous meetings of Thursday, November 7th. Any discussion?
Yes.
Alderman Jetty?
Have we received those? I don't.
They're not here. That's what I just,
I think they were online because I looked at them.
I have an extra copy if they want.
Somebody has,
no.
they were on the website, but
Do you want the extra copy?
somebody you want to look at a copy, or
I just
you
want
want
to
to
make sure.
postpone it till the next meeting?
I just want to make sure we have, we have minutes.
No, they do have them, yes.
That we're approving.
You want to hand those down to him?
Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, remarks by chairman. This evening, this is a normal joint special school building committee meeting. Basically, we're going to be paying a couple of invoices this evening. Then we're going to have remarks by school administration, if they have any. We don't need a non-public. We will have comments by members of the public during the meeting portion of the joint special. Then when we adjourn the meeting of the joint special, we have Harriman here to answer any questions that you may have. The comment session of our meetings normally is just for comments only. But after we close the meeting, I've been asked by some of the members of the public to have a session here so they can answer questions. So Harriman is here, and they will ask questions, answer questions, really. Okay. Let's see. Any school administration comments, Sean?
No.
None. Items for discussion and approval, architect's report.
Thank you very much, Chairman Dowd. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Lee, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm an architect with Harriman, and But specifically, an update on the project to report to the JSSBC. We have met since our last meeting as a group with a smaller steering committee to review some of the input that we received from the public at the open forum information night that we had, and starting to look at some of the questions that were asked and starting to compile a list for publication of those frequently asked questions. And so that'll be helpful for the public to understand, and we don't have to constantly answer the same question. So that's good. The other thing we've been doing is going through some of the questions that the board has brought forward. Some of them had to do with the compliance of the feasibility study design, the concept designs of the schools to the state DOE guidelines for school construction. And so we've looked at some of those and starting to look at where there are maybe concerns. And so, for instance, I think there are DOE standards call for a 900 square foot classroom, and it's a pretty standard. And so in the new construction, we're able to build 900 square foot classrooms. In the existing schools, it's not always technically feasible. They're already constructed the classroom sizes, and so while the standard is 900 square feet, what we've done is looked at the capacities of the schools relative to the 36 square feet per student in a classroom. And so it's not technically feasible to extend a classroom wall, an exterior wall, about 4 feet. So we just account for a lower capacity at each of those classrooms. There are some, we've looked at the libraries of all the 3 schools in the revised, or in the concept designs, and those are all compliant. We looked at the capacities of the cafeterias of each of the schools, and all of those are compliant. And as we move forward, as we've been clear with everyone, these are still a feasibility study, and so the concept design hasn't accounted for every aspect of every component that we'll get into in the detailed design. But the nursing areas, for instance, are a little short at both Fairgrounds and Pennachuck, and we'll look to see where we can recover some space in some of those spaces. But by and large, we've gone through just to look at how they comply with on the space guidelines, and we're very, very comfortable with where we are regarding those standards. The other consideration we did was, I think there was questions regarding the sizes of the schools and how they compare to one another. That question has come up, and we said we would come back to this group with kind of an evaluation or an analysis of that. And so what we did was we looked at the gross areas of each of the 3 schools, and by that the Fairgrounds concept design, the Pennachuck concept design, and then the new school concept design. And we looked not only at the overall gross numbers, which were contained in the report, but we also looked at the net areas. And so if we subtract out all the thickness of walls and the corridors and stairs and mechanical rooms and all the things that are outside of the constraints of the room itself, we call that the net area. And so we evaluated the net area for the 3 different schools. And then we looked at the net area per student of the schools, and that's a number that we look at carefully because that's the actual space that's usable in the building. And the comparison it was about where we had hoped it would be. That the Fairgrounds Middle School, the net area is about 85,000 square feet, and that translates to about 104 square feet per student net area. The Pennachuck concept design has about 88,000 square feet of net area, and that translates to about 100 square feet per student. And then the new proposed middle school has a net area of about 112,000 square feet, and because we do have a larger special education enrollment at that, it's not the 800, we're about a little over 1,000 students with the special education students, and that equates to about 103 square feet, net square feet per student. So 104, 100, 103, which are really in a pretty tight range, and so that's kind of where those numbers laid out. The big difference between the gross area of the new school relative to the gross areas of the Pennachuck and Fairgrounds is that the constraint of the site changes the configuration a bit, and as well as with the new school, we have the opportunity to put all the mechanical equipment in the building, which adds more square footage to the building, but it's not usable square footage. And so it's better than putting equipment on the roof, which reduces the serviceable life of the equipment. And that we have more circulation. The Fairgrounds and Pennachuck are all on a single story, and so we don't have the stairs that we would have, an elevator, and those start to add to the spaces that aren't, again, usable student space in the building itself. And so that's really what accounts for the majority of the difference with the footprints, as well as some of the special education spaces that we're designing for the more need-intensive programs take more square footage than a standard classroom, and so that expands the classrooms a little bit as well. But so that's a little bit of the evaluation that we've been up to. We also went back to look at the process that we had gone through in terms of the number of meetings and the stakeholder engagement and public engagement that we have had during the course of the design of the feasibility study. And we counted, going back to March of this year, eight meetings with this committee, not including tonight. So this would be the ninth meeting. We've had Board of Education meeting. We've had two public information meetings. So we had one at the Elm Street Middle School in June, and then we had another one in October at Nashua North. And then we've had several engagement meetings with staff, and so we had 3 meetings, one at each school. We've had meetings with the special education department, with athletics, with career technology and unified arts, and then we had a staff presentation in October as well. And then most recently, on the 4th of November, we had a meeting with the middle school steering committee, as it's called, and we reported on that, I think, at our last joint special meeting as well. We've also sent out, we had staff surveys and received about over 200 responses to the staff, or from staff, to those survey questions, which was, it's one of the highest response rates we've ever had in our educational planning surveys. So we're really very, very pleased at the staff's interest in the designing of the schools. We've also had our city planning, code enforcement, and public safety meeting. That was back in July. And we've also had a smaller steering group that we met with about every other week, and I think we've counted about 12 of those meetings as well. And so we were sort of taking inventory of. It's been actually a pretty comprehensive effort in the time since we began in earnest back in March, and so and we're moving forward. We're going to continue to involve as many people as we can. Again, we remind everyone that this is still a concept design, and that doesn't mean things are cast in stone. It means that we've got it to a point where we can reasonably understand the size and the logistics of placing a building on the site in the 3 different schemes where those program spaces are going to go. And we look forward to this continued effort as we move forward to refine those and adjust them as we get more and more input. And so with that, Mr. Dowd, I'll turn it back over.
Thank you. Okay. The next is invoice approval. Mr. Smith, do you want to address that?
Sure, we have 2 invoices for approval tonight. One is for Harriman in a total amount of $8,096.72. The second one is to Hayner Swanson, who was our surveyor, in the amount of $18,497.76 for a total of $26,594.48.
So would someone like to make a motion to approve those 2 invoices? Alderman Wiltshire?
So moved.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to approve 2 invoices, one to Harriman A&E the amount of $8,096.72. A second to Hayner Swanson in the amount of $18,497.76 for a total of $26,594.48. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Now, just to reiterate, I'm going to have a session right now, as we do for every joint special. If somebody has a comment that they want to make, they can come up to that microphone, make the comment. This will not be a question and answer period at this time. Once we close the regular joint special, we're going to open up for questions and answers if you want to hold it, and Harriman will be answering those questions. So is there anybody that wants to make a comment? Please state your name and address for the record.
Howard Kaufman, 379 Amherst Street, Nashua. I'm a member of the Nashua School Board. I'd just like to point out that professionally, I'm trained as a project manager, have dealt with feasibility studies. Feasibility studies are intended to look at all circumstances. They're supposed to be extremely comprehensive, look at alternatives, contingencies, and everything else. So what I would like to point out to this committee and for the public that's here and watching, one of the biggest concerns I have is, as I understand the plan currently, I don't know that anything has changed, is that the project itself, this committee has not secured a right-of-way or an easement to the building lot. There is a private owner that has that owns that land that this project proposes to use as a way to get into the property, and this committee does not have. The city doesn't own it, and they don't have a contract in hand. Yet they're ready to commit $118 million on a project they can't even drive into. This plan, the feasibility plan, if it were complete, would include a school redistricting plan. You're going from a central, downtown type school. Those kids are going to be relocated out here. You need to redistrict the school district. That's not an easy thing to do. That is not even considered in this plan. It's something they're willing to put off in the future. A true feasibility plan would include that. There's no enrollment data, be it historical or projected, which happens to be required by law. There's no HR impact plan. So we don't have a staffing plan for these new buildings. There is information about programming. There'll be X number of classrooms, but we don't know how many get moved, what new hires we might need, etc. There's no transportation plan. How are we going to move all these 1,100 kids around from Elm Street? And the new kids, how will they all get divided amongst the three schools? There have been no public hearings. You've had 2 informational sessions, but not a public hearing. There's a very good 2 assessments relative to road work at Fairgrounds, very detailed, and Pennachuck, where the traffic light's going to be, where the new entrance is going to be, where the sidewalk is going to be. None of that exists for the new building, proposed building. There's no technology plan. There was a time when the State Department of Education required a technology plan be included in all new building plans. They dropped that as a requirement, but I would argue as a best practice, we should have a technology plan specifically for new building. I will also comment that the school district itself is on record with the state, and if you go to the state website, they say our technology plan is more than 5 years old. So the school district itself is lacking in a technology plan, and there's no effort on the part of this committee to ensure that one gets developed for the new building. The SPED, the special education plan, the new building and things that they're proposing, personally I think it's a great idea. I've been an advocate for that for a long time. But contrary to stated comments at this committee, the proposal for the new building only addresses grades 6 through 8 in special ed. It fails to address K through 12. So we're only addressing 3 grades with this plan. We're not addressing the rest of the school district needs. So when there's talk of, saving money out of that $5.7 million we spend in out-of-district tuition, it's not $8 million. Right now, this year, it's 5.6. By the end of the year, it'll probably be closer to $6 million. But the point is, it's not fully addressed by this plan. Only a small chunk of it is. There's no school district operating budget impact statement. So in other words, with all the new building and after it's built, well, what does that mean to the operating budget? It could be salaries, it could be maintenance. You still have the other buildings. There's no impact on the operating budget. We run a very tight budget, I'll say that. Roughly 80% of our costs go to salaries. The remaining 20%, the remaining 14% go to special ed expenses and transportation. The remaining 6% pays for everything else. Books, curriculum, anything you can imagine, the lights. There's no citywide demographic data included in this plan. So just based on these things, I would make the argument that the feasibility study is woefully inadequate and incomplete. I do not object to the idea of a new middle school. I've been supportive of it. The problem I have is that the feasibility study is not doing its job. I want to thank the architects tonight for backfilling the information on the square footage. Thank you.
Anyone else who wants to make a comment?
Good evening. My name is Paula Johnson. I live at 15 Westbourne Drive. I'm newly elected to the Board of Education. I want to thank everybody who voted for me. This is going to be a big pill to swallow again, like I did the first time I was on this board. Back in October, I had asked questions of the last joint special school building committee meeting that I was able to attend, and I directed it to you, Alderman Dowd. I pulled the minute meetings. I don't see any answers back in any of the other meetings. I asked, were the residents of Cherrywood and the surrounding areas, were they notified of this? Were they able to see any type of plan? Because usually it's the abutters, but usually the abutters don't see anything until it gets to the planning board. And that's usually what happens. And you see those little green signs go up around the city, and it talks about that something's coming into your neighborhood. But you don't know about it until after the fact. So all these people, and I remember when Cherrywood was built, because I sat on the board with one of the members, Kim Shaw, who later was president of the board, who lives in that area. And I think it's very unfair, because I remember with Stello Stadium and everything that went into mine. We're not NIMBYs, not in my neighborhood. We just want the information of what's going to happen in the neighborhood when you put these big projects. I was on the board when you had the project of Stellos. I was on the board of education, plus on the board of aldermen, when we did the North School and the South School. And people who lived up on Broad Street were very concerned about the North School and the parking and what. But this is a middle school, so we won't have the problem with the parking with the students. Where have these people been consulted? My question has been, and I've talked to my alderman, Ward 5, Alderman Jetty, about traffic studies. Traffic studies on West Hollis Street never seem to exist. They're like 11 years old. We have major traffic on West Hollis Street. We have major traffic of everybody running the red light. What is the bus routes going to be as they're coming from downtown? Are they going to be going to West Hollis Street? Because most likely they're going to have to, because the kids that are going to Elm Street are now going to be going to this new school, so you're going to have to be picking them up along the way. So traffic study is the next biggest thing. As this city is growing, we do not do any planning to grow with the city. And I know because I remember all the 5-year plans on the growth of the city. I just talked to Ms. Odom, Ms. Porter, regarding special ed. This thing is a nightmare with this special ed. We're talking about the middle school, but what are we doing with grades K through 5 and 9 through 12? Are we going to bring them all back for the middle of their lives and then outsource them almost like again? And that's what it basically is. You've got these kids that are being on buses and vehicles for hours at a time going down to Massachusetts. There is no plan that I have seen, and even when I was on the board the first time, I talked about a collaborative school. And Mr. Giuliano said, we can't make a profit. It wasn't for profit. It was to bring our children back to the city and open it up for other districts to bring their kids in here. So we didn't have to put them on buses for hours at a time. So I don't see any of this. We're going to talk about this later. No, we need to talk about this now. Because what's going to happen is later never comes, and it becomes a nightmare that we're going to spend $118 million on schools, and we're not going to have a plan in place, especially for special ed. I don't see anything about how this whole curriculum is going to be done. I just see more and more questions. Mr. Kaufman asked questions. I guess people traded 2 people in for me. I don't know, but I'm going to come in and ask these tough questions like I did once before. Because unless we have a plan in place, and what is our duty here in the schools is to teach these kids to be good citizens, good students, reading, writing, arithmetic, and I don't care about everything else, but because we have to teach them the basics first. If that foundation is not there, it doesn't matter how much we pay for these schools, these kids aren't going to excel. So I asked about all that. I asked about budgeting. I asked about bonding. I asked about what's going to happen with the special ed kids, with the grades. And the minutes that I've seen after, I don't see anything. And Mr. Kaufman asked basically about the same questions that I'm going to be asking when I get on the board. I mean, we can't put the cart before the horse. And that's what we seem to be doing, putting that cart before the horse. We'll spend $118 million. How are we going to redistrict? Okay. Enrollment. And that's what I just said to another member who just got elected. I said enrollment's down. So how many kids are we building for? We know that there's a shortage of housing in this city, and it's all over. The shortage is because of people who would be first-time home buyers, that $200,000 to $300,000 home. Those are the ones that come in here and will have the kids that will bring them into the school. There's a shortage of housing. So with that shortage, we're not seeing the families moving in and buying the homes, because I guess people like myself, the baby boomers, we're not selling. Programming in the classroom, transportation, and again, there's been no real public hearing for these abutters to get up here and ask every one of the questions, what's going to happen in my neighborhood? How are these buses going to come in? How much traffic is it going to cause? Because we know how much traffic. You just look at that high school when it gets out. That's one other time during the day when that high school gets out on West Hollis Street. From 2:30, almost 40 minutes, that road is backed up. So these are questions they have the right to know, and I don't think anything should go forward until these abutters and everybody in the city happens to know exactly what that plan is all about, because this is a lot of bonding. There's a meeting on, I believe, the 7th or 5th of December that's going to be talking about the bonding. That's a public hearing. The second? The second. I won't be able to get to that meeting, but they're going to be talking about the bond. And they're going to be talking about, in that budget committee, it's a public hearing, because they're going to vote that night, I guarantee you. They're going to vote that night to float that bond. And once that bond starts going through, a lot of questions aren't going to be asked and answered. Now's the time to do it, before the bond goes and before this becomes a nightmare. Thank you.
I'm Doris Owens, 15 Swart Terrace. I'm a member of the Board of Education. This process has been very difficult. We don't get answers on the board. Just to give you an idea of how disconnected the board was from this entire process for the past year and a half, I'm going to take the minutes of our special board meeting that came 20 minutes before the JSSBC meeting where they approved this project. This is Mrs. Raymond, our president of our board. And right before the motion, right before we voted, I just want to be clear tonight that this motion is not binding us to build a new middle school. Okay? That was the conversation that we had that night. So that meeting closes. 20 minutes later, your board comes together and she turns around and says, we had a lot of discussion and we're all in. And you voted unanimously for this project. There's a big disconnect here. So we on the board have not gotten the answers to our questions, let alone the parents who don't even have the access that we have. So this is disturbing. I have one question, and I asked one of the aldermen on this board. Was any other lot considered for the new building? I'm not against fixing the building, the middle school, or building a new one. I mean, I want to do it right. There was no consideration of any other piece of land other than that landlocked 20 acres that has no easement and that will require the city to put in a roadway. And I had estimates put out on that, and I got word back that it'll be 1.4 million to put a road in, and that's without culverts or sidewalks or anything else that we need to have children coming into the school. Now, maybe that's high, maybe it's low. But why are we adding another million to get access to that lot when across the street we have 3 city-owned lots totaling of 60 acres that have total frontage? Maybe there's some wetlands there. There was some wetlands on the landlocked 20 acres. But why weren't we looking at other options? Why is it just, this is it? And then back in June, we have the mayor in the front page of the paper saying, we're going to put apartments in Elm Street. It's like the decision was made before we, the players, the parents, had a voice. So just remember that this is what she told us at our meeting. I just want to be clear tonight that this motion is not binding us to build a new middle school. That's the understanding the Board of Education had when we approved this project. Thank you.
Anyone else like to make a comment?
Hi, I'm Cristin Ford. I live at 101 Cherrywood Drive, and my property abuts this piece of land. Alderman Dowd, thank you for being responsive. I have been in touch with him no less than a dozen times in the last couple of months here. Getting as many answers as we can. I want to thank Howard Kaufman, Doris Owens, and Paula Johnson, the 3 of you, because I echo everything you've said. Paula, you specifically. Alderman Dowd, I have mentioned this to you, and for the rest of the committee. I moved into my house at the end of April of this year, and it was, unbeknownst to me that this project was going on. Was it my responsibility to find out? My realtor? I have no idea. Regardless, I surveyed all of my neighbors, and literally none of them knew. Everybody surrounding my house, even all the way down Cherrywood, all the other streets, nobody knew what was going on, and many of them are the original owners of their homes in Maplewood. So that was very disturbing to me that, I found out, Doris just mentioned the Telegraph article back in June. That is how I found out about this project, and which is great, like it's in the newspaper, but none of us abutters were, contacted, or, it's as if our opinions or our, anything that we feel about it just doesn't matter. So that has been a bit frustrating. And to that end, Alderman Dowd, I'm going to be sending you, the entire JSSBC, the mayor, and Board of Education. I have rounded up a petition with over 200 signatures opposing this plan. I do understand that there are some people in our neighborhood who are for it. And I get it. As a parent, I told you before, I feel very ambivalent about it. I have a 3-year-old daughter who eventually will be in the public school system. I'm not against building a new school, but I want it done the right way. And I do still have a lot of concerns being in a butter, and I know the rest of my neighbors do too. Some of them are here tonight, some of them were not able to make it, but I have had a lot of conversations, and I've been trying to rally up the neighborhood. So we're just going to keep pressing on. Thank you for your time.
Anyone else?
Cam McGurk, 72 Charlotte Street. I am a long time employee of the Nashua School District. I'm currently the head speech-language pathologist in the district, and I work with students at Pennachuck Middle School and the intensive needs population at Fairgrounds Middle School. And in my 51 and a half years in the school district, I've been through renovations of every one of the 11 buildings I've worked in. We are a department of 27 speech-language pathologists, and my comments are directly to the architects. I've taken the opportunity to answer the survey, to put in writing my concerns that your concept design for the speech-language offices in the different schools is based on a very outdated concept that there's one speech-language pathologist per building working with one student at a time in a small windowless office. I know I'll never get a window, and I'm not concerned about that. But before any renovation is done or a new building built, you must update your concept of special education, specifically speech-language pathologists. We have 17 schools. There are 28 of us, so obviously more than one school has multiple people working in it. At Fairgrounds Middle School, currently, there are 4 speech-language pathologists. One who works with the deaf population, I who work with one group of intensive needs, another one who works with another group of intensive needs, and one who works with, quote-unquote, the regular kids in the building. 4 of us working out of whatever space we can find. When you design this wonderful new school, no matter where it is, I hear that there will be a wonderful special ed wing. I've been in the wonderful special ed wings at our high schools that are fairly new. The concept was there would be one speech-language pathologist, one occupational therapist, one physical therapist working in a space. That's not the reality of how our schools operate. We're not a hospital clinic. We're a school, but you have to update your concept of how many people in each profession. The concept for the Pennachuck Middle School moves me, whoever the speech pathologist is, from the closet I now work in. The good thing about working in a storage closet is I have really great shelf space. I don't have heat, air, an intercom, or anything. I do have a computer. And probably in a dangerous situation, my cement block environment would be wonderfully safe if I could fit anybody besides myself in it. In the concept, you have moved the speech-language office to a sliver of a current classroom, and it's not only a speech-language office, it's a pathway through to the occupational therapy and physical therapy setting behind it. I thought to myself, who designs an office that is also a corridor through to something else? In the concept design for the renovation of Fairgrounds Middle School, I chuckled. My first sojourn at Fairgrounds Middle School was in 1968, and the speech and language office was at the end of one of the wings, and I saw that in the concept design, you're actually moving us back to the end of one of the wings, to another sliver of a space that certainly 4 of us will not be able to work out of. Nothing's going to change about special education because the environment changes. So if you go forward with a concept that does not consider that multiple speech-language pathologists, multiple occupational therapists, and multiple physical therapists work in that environment, and you design spaces for one of those professionals, the building will be out of date the moment we move into it. So I ask you to look at the surveys, look at my written testimony. I'm happy to speak to anybody. And whenever the building is built, there's never going to be enough space for everything we want. But it would be nice if there was consideration that you need to update your concept of how those clinical services of speech, language, occupational therapy, and physical therapy work. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Comments from any members of the board? Alderman Jettie?
I don't want to take any time from the question and answer period. I just want to acknowledge that I count almost 40 people here from the public, and I want to thank you all for coming and asking your questions, expressing your opinions, and we appreciate your input. Thank you.
Anyone else? Just a couple Just a couple things. I heard from a couple of the aldermen and some of the neighbors down here that they wanted to have a question and answer period, so that's why we're having the meeting here tonight. So the architects are here, and you can ask questions and get answers. If we can't answer the question this evening, we will have answers available. We've set up, or setting up, I don't know if it's ready yet, the question and answer section in the middle school area on the school website. So the questions that we have answers to will appear there. All the questions from this evening will be answered. The one thing I asked that we don't discuss this evening is the access road. It's been in negotiation for months. Corporation Council says any discussion is not in the best interest of the city, and so we will not be discussing the particulars of that. I will tell you that every penny for the access road is already in the bond. So I just leave it at that. Any other questions, we will be willing, that the architects can answer. If you want to come up and ask the question, they'll try to answer it. The other thing is, and I'm not trying to pass the buck on some, but a lot of the things that were brought up this evening as concerns, like redistricting, are all a factor of the Board of Education, not the Joint Special School Building Committee. And the other thing I will say is I had a meeting with the Transportation Director already, with Mr. Donovan and Mrs. Fitzpatrick. And if the redistricting is done geographically, there'll be very little impact, if any, to busing. Most of the students that go to Elm Street from this area down here all bus to Elm Street. This whole southern end of town all go to Elm Street. You can actually find that on the GIS portion of the city's website. It'll show you where all the 3 middle school students come from. And you'll see that the majority of people that live in this part of town all get bused to Elm Street. So, but the busing, the redistricting, that's all a factor of work that has to be done by the Board of Education. And we have a few years before we ever have a new school open or Pennachuck modified. The next phase, which we would be starting after the bond is approved, is the detailed design. And a lot of the things that have been brought up will be addressed during the detailed design phase. And all of the groups that have had inputs up to now will get access as we go through that design phase. So we're not putting shovels in the ground tomorrow. So it's a whole process to follow. And we're following that process as we speak. Anyone else? Do I have a motion?
Move to adjourn.
Motion is to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned at 7:42 PM. If anybody has questions of the architect, excuse me. If anybody has questions for the architect, you can come up and ask them. Like I said, if they don't have the answer this evening, they'll get back to you, and it'll also be in the Q&A portion of the school district website. Does anybody have a question for the architect? Please state your name and address for the record.
Prasad Tirvedi, 6 Medallion Court. And I don't understand, one question is, the letter we received from school district says we are going to fund $150 or $150 million to shovel the ground, but the design, I don't know what to ask here, because I live on the Medallion Court. And then the member says, we are not going back. I don't think you are going back to redesign, and we are not even notified as the residents also. A lot of questions. What is the buffer that you are going to leave to the Medallion Court? On the drawings, it says 100 to 250. What is the decided buffer zone?
So, yeah, I don't know if you said you had multiple questions. So the buffer for both Cherrywood and Medallion that we've shown on the site plan, we don't have the site plan with us, I don't think on a blow-up so everyone can see it, but I think the last time we looked at maintaining certainly a wooded buffer along both edges of the site along both of those areas. And I think the last time we had a scale that we looked at to roughly gauge what the distance is. We'll publish what the actual setback is from the property line, but we're leaving a wooded buffer against from both Medallion and from Cherrywood to the building, and even the way we had positioned the building, we tried to keep the majority, the mass of the building in the more active edge of the building and its operations further from the property on those two sides. So the public functions that would be evening functions, the gym, and even the main entrance and the gathering spaces, all of that is more in the central edge of the site to try to make the quieter edge of the site the ones that abut the areas, the neighborhood areas. And so again, we'll get back to you in terms of what the actual setback distance are, but we've been trying to be very mindful of leaving a wooded buffer so that there's a separation from the functions going on at the school site to the neighborhoods.
Just two additional things. Since day one, and actually day one, I think I was talking to you.
Not the day one, day
Well,
10.
But there's no intent to have any access to the school from Medallion.
Well, in the beginning, it was started from main entrance even on the Medallion Court. That's where everyone got, even I was almost running away because it's facing my house.
But once we did an analysis of Medallion, it's too narrow, it's not conducive to an entrance to the school, so it was eliminated. So there's no access from Medallion. And as far as Cherrywood, between Cherrywood and the school property, there are two other pieces of property owned by the city. One that's purely a buffer zone, and it's a good-sized lot all the way along the houses. And then a second lot that is for recreational purposes. The school is not on those two sites, so there's a really significant buffer between most of the houses on Cherrywood.
Coming to that, the back entrance or emergency entrance.
Excuse me, sir, can you talk into the microphone or stand behind the microphone?
I'm sorry. Coming to that emergency entrance, is that going to be secured or is that an open entrance?
You want to address that? or
Yeah,
not?
sure. And so that is a detail we can look at both options. What we typically do is put the flexibility of putting in a gate so that you can determine if you want to allow that to be, or to the degree to which you want to allow access or not. So that's a flexibility in the design to allow you, from a policy perspective, to figure out what works best. But the emergency drive is only intended for emergency vehicles to get access on there. It's prudent design to make sure that if anything were to happen to to the main entrance, that there is an option to get into the site to access the school for safety.
It's sort of a requirement for all of our schools these days that you have two accesses for all the things that are going on in the United States. And how it's designed will be a factor of input from the police and the fire department because they're the ones that'll be using it. So it will not be open for any other traffic other than an emergency.
Is there any wall or something to prevent noise to the nearby residents? I know the architect mentioned about green buffer because buildings are very nearby. Is there?
Not sure what you mean.
What
A
I'm
wall?
asking is some kind of noise prevention to the residents who lives nearby the building.
We'll discuss that, but I'm not sure exactly what you're looking for. A fence?
Sound barrier.
Sound barrier.
Oh, the trees, if you have 100 feet of trees that are really as thick as the ones that are down there, That's all the sound barrier you need. Because when they built the mounds and things along the highway, they don't work very well. And it's not that kind of noise anyway. So the intent with the tree buffer is that you won't hear anything from the school.
Well, school sports, it's not just the kids coming to the classes and after school activities and sports and all.
And at this time, as far as the building committee is concerned, there is no lighting for any evening events on the fields. If the Board of Ed wants to change that later on, that'll be up to the Board of Ed. Once we turn the building over to the Board of Ed, it's up to the Board of Ed.
Again, just another note on how we've organized components on the site. What we try to do is put those ball fields in that further area that is buffered by the adjacent parcel. And so the idea that the play fields are in a quieter edge and further separated from the houses.
Well, I'm not opposing building the new school or giving best education for the kids, but we had to do it right, doing all possible feasible studies and making sure the neighbors are also happy with and, not, so that it becomes happy for everyone, but not just doing it, something based on the old standards or not doing it right. Thank you.
Anyone else have a question for the architects?
So, Chairman Dodd?
Alderman Jettie.
While people are thinking about what questions they might want to come up and ask, I want to point out that it's unfortunate that we don't have the presentation available to put on some screen here, but people can go to the school department website, which is www.nashua.edu, and there is a middle school tab, and everything that the architects have prepared, their report and their drawings and the site plans and everything are all available at that site, and you can look at it and see it a lot better than just talking about it.
And also, we do have some boards that after, they're small boards, so I don't think you're going to gain much by seeing them. But you're right, a format where we could see a big presentation would be a little easier. But please, after this is done, if you want to come up, and we'll gladly share any information we have on those boards, and you can get a closer look and ask questions on those. So.
There was one other question about traffic on West Hollis Street. And there is a new Department of Public Works garage being considered at the landfill. Not a big building, but an office building, and not a maintenance garage either. And the DPW has done a traffic study for West Hollis Street, and it's available through the DPW. Has nothing to do with this project.
Paula Johnson. Could you tell me when that study was done, Alderman Dowd?
I can't give you an exact date because it was presented at the last Department of Public Works Committee meeting. Mr., I want to say his name's Hubbard?
Husband.
And he is the city traffic engineer, and he actually gave quite a long, detailed analysis of the traffic on West Hollis Street.
Okay, I've got a question on the sound buffer, because you just said to that gentleman, it was said that if you have all these big grown trees there, you're not going to hear any noise, but if the school department ever decides to open up for nighttime activities, well, let me think. Back in, let's see, I was on the board from 2000 to 2001, and we built Stello Stadium. And I remember there was an agreement with the mayor that there would never be any marching bands at Stellos, anything very noisy, because of the abutters in the neighborhood that I lived in. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Alderman Dowd, I think you changed it, and we got the marching band at Stellos. So we hear the noise, and we have all those big overgrown trees in our area. The noise also does come across the river, and it hits us back into the neighborhood. So I can't go along with that buffer stuff because, yes, the Board of Ed can change it, and the alderman can go in and also change it because it was changed on us after the agreement was made with the mayor. So don't let it be fooled. Things can get changed because boards change every 2 to 4 years, and changes come about. And it happened to us after an agreement with Bernie Street, or Mayor Street at that point in time when that was built. Because where I live now, it's now become the sports complex of Nashua. And that's why they want to move buildings out. But I'm not going to bet my life that things aren't going to change down the road as boards change later on. So I'm going to tell everybody, get your questions answered now. Make sure everything gets answered, because once that bond is approved, you're not going to go back. No one's going to go back and say, we're going to just forget about this bond. That bond is approved. They are going to build, and then you're going to fight, because once it gets to the planning board, that's when the arguments really start with what's allowed. This is just surface. It's the planning board that really makes the decisions. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't believe I changed it because I was an alderman when that happened.
Then you changed it when you were on the board. I remember.
Board of Ed?
You were on the Board of Ed after I left to become an alderman.
Okay, one member can't make a change, so.
But you could put it through the rest of the board to make a change with you after an agreement was made.
You're not on the mic, don't talk.
Yeah.
Don't talk to me.
Doris Owens again. So I'm looking at the picture that Alderman Jetty had pointed out, and the emergency exit comes down, not down Medallion, but it comes out where there's a circle where Medallion hits Cherrywood. So everybody on Medallion and Cherrywood for the first 4, 5, 6 houses are very, very close to the tennis courts and some of the ball fields. That's the emergency exit. And there was discussions on whether or not students would be using that as an alternate entrance with their bikes or whatever. So that exists. But my question is, why wasn't there any discussion on alternate lots, either on the other side, the west side of Buck Meadow, the 60 acres? Because this lot, being landlocked, is closer to 20 properties that are all small, 1/4 to 1/3 of an acre. Whereas across the street, if you put it on the 60-acre lot, there's 3 parcels. You could have the emergency and the main entrance on Buck Meadow. It's very deep. There's only 5 houses that it could possibly abut. And in the back, there's a stream before you get, or on the property of the abutters. So they have that as a buffer. And most of those properties are an acre or multiple acres. So they're larger properties. You're not having tennis courts that are right there next to your, your bathrooms or your back doors or your windows. I mean, it's more than 100 feet. So I know there could be some wetlands. There are some wetlands on the 20-acre lot. Why did we not consider that? And granted, it might, the 1.4 or 2 million or whatever it costs to build that road might be in your $118 million bond. But why not use that 2 million to make the building bigger instead of this long access road? I mean, why is this the optimal solution? Why weren't other solutions thought about?
We did look at other lots, and the lots you're talking about are conservation land and wetlands and can't be built on.
The entire 60 acres?
Yes. If you look, you go on the city's website on GIS,
Okay.
you'll look and see the city owns it, but it's conservation land. It's set aside and it can't be touched.
And there's no other.
And we also worked with Tim Cummings and looking at other properties, and there are no other properties. And if they did have a same-size lot, it would be over $6 million purchase price. This lot belongs to the city already and was set aside 22 years ago for a school.
Mm-hmm. We just have a lot of property. It's just, it's disappointing the way this thing came together.
I would just like to point out, I've been on the board 4 years and the Finance Committee pretty much all that time. And we started the conversations about this project on that Finance Committee probably 3 or 4 years ago. And one of the questions I asked at the time, when the city still owned the Burke Street property, was why can't we put it over the Burke Street? Because that was pretty much more central downtown and et cetera. And we were told, no, we have to build out here. So there was a suggestion, at least on my part, because I know I asked about it, about what about an alternative property. That was never seriously investigated. So I just want to take issue with your statement that there weren't other alternatives suggested or evaluated. Yes, things were suggested, at least one instance, and no, it was never evaluated.
That lot was recently sold.
That's right. I said when the city still owned it is what I
Right,
said.
and the idea when we bought that lot was to allow us to subdivide the lot to get the 2 acres we need for the wastewater treatment plant. We thought about putting the DPW garage there, that was cost prohibitive. So since that decision was made, it's been available for sale, and it just recently sold. So it was not available for a school through the city. If you want to address that with Mr. Cummings, have at it.
Hi, I'm Vijaya Bhashyam. I live at 5 Cherrywood Drive, and I'm closer to the Buckmeadow Road. I'm not sure how frequently you have traveled via Buckmeadow Road. I've been in that place for 17 years, and I travel by Buckmeadow Road every single day. Anytime after October till mid-March, that place would be completely fogged. I have a middle schooler who has to take the bus from the Buckmeadow Road Cherrywood Drive intersection, and either me or my husband must go and stand with her because it is so foggy. You cannot see anything in that road, and it is covered by wetlands on both the sides. So I don't know if such a consideration was given for transportation in that area. And another thing I'm also thinking is, now that the school is here, many kids in that area would still fall within that 1 kilometer or 1 mile radius. So they may have to walk down to the school. So has that been considered? And another thing is, the Buckmeadow Road is actually a very small lane. And majority of that road doesn't have sidewalk. So the moment you put in sidewalk, and there is also farmland opposite to the place that is currently being planned for the city, planned for the school. And that farmland is and since there is a farmland, the road itself is elevated to a good extent. So when you put sidewalks, you also need to consider how the safety of the kids there. The moment sidewalks comes in, the road is going to be much more narrower, where two-way lane is not going to be possible. So this is something that I want to bring up because I see this every single day driving through that road. And I'm not sure, I can choose to go inside Cherrywood Drive and cut onto Ridge Road. But then for me, for living in 5 Cherrywood Drive, driving via Buckmeadow Road is much more closer. So I wanted to bring this point. And then another thing I also wanted to find out is, right now, my second child is currently in Main Dunstable. She would be going to Elm Street once the middle school year comes in. Regarding the planning, when do we plan to move the kids to here? Has that dates been finalized, or has that been discussed with the parents, or is there a public hearing planned for it?
In terms of the construction schedule and when we think the school would open. So right now, the current thinking that we've had with the contractor is that the construction would start in 2021 or late in 2020, and it would take approximately about 24 months for the construction. So it would open, right now the thinking is the fall of 2023.
And on Buckmeadow Road, there is a sidewalk that runs.
I know it runs only from a little bit from the Maplewood all the way.
It runs all the way down to within, depending where the road ends up, 50 to 100 yards from the access road. Mm-hmm. We have money in the project to continue the sidewalk all the way to the school, and we're working with the city to do the sidewalk from what's the name of the other street? What? Ridge Road, excuse me, up to there. The sidewalk easement access is not in the current road structure. It's, the city owns on either side of the road,
Okay.
and that's where the sidewalks go.
All right, thank you.
So we definitely are gonna make safe sidewalks for anybody that's walking.
Before the next speaker starts, I see people standing. These are not attractive seats because they're in the front row. But there are seats here.
Sure.
And there are seats over there next to the podium.
Kathy Louie, 17 Tanglewood Drive. I agree with the lady who just spoke about the fog. It's terrible. I do have concerns about the amount of traffic that will be coming through. You're basically going to be taking the children who have been bused and making them walkers. And the kids who are downtown, who have been walking to Elm, are now going to be bused. A lot of them are latchkey kids. I don't know if any of the parents from downtown have come and spoken about that. I'm sure they have concerns about what the impact to their children will be as well. We do live very close to the sports areas. I'm going to switch gears for a second and just say that the noise is a factor. The sports fields go, night and day, weekends, what have you, and we can hear from the end of Tanglewood, we can hear the sporting events going on the fields, quite a distance away. So I agree with folks about the buffer. The trees are just, we have a forest between us and the other end, and we can hear everything. I'm very concerned about the fact that when you come down Gilson Road, where it meets 111, and directly across from Buck Meadow, it ices up in the wintertime. And people, myself included, have slid across that intersection because it's icy. And that's not to say that the DPW is not doing their part. They are. But there are times when, it just freezes up. This is New England. That's how it is. But have you considered the fact that you're taking big buses full of children through that intersection? And how is that going to be addressed? Is there going to be a light? That intersection is notorious for accidents. And I'm very concerned that you're putting a high volume of cars and buses through that area now, and it simply is not going to be adequate to the task.
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion about that intersection. First of all, if there's a school on Buck Meadow, that will get priority as far as sanding, salting, and plowing. That intersection would not be part of this project. It would be something addressed by the DPW. So any concerns would have to be brought up to them so that they can address them and fix them. There's already buses that go Buck Meadow because everybody down in that area gets bused to Elm Street.
Correct.
So there are buses going in one direction, they just be going in the other. The traffic would be at 2 times of the day when school's getting ready to start and then when school lets out. But in between, even like the high schools, there's not very much traffic during the school.
What I'm saying is right now for Elm Street, there's a couple of buses picking up the children in our area to take them down to Elm, and now you're taking all the kids who are at Elm, who are walkers, and taking them by a bus, which means that they're going to have to navigate the streets of downtown and head out to our area. And so I don't know if you've talked to Dave Rossio about it, and maybe he's not concerned about it. He's the director of transportation, but I do worry about that.
I did talk to him, and a lot of the walkers that go to Elm Street will now walk to Fairgrounds, and the others will be bused to Fairgrounds. If the school board does the
Redistricting.
geographical districting, everybody in the center of the city will be going to Fairgrounds. Everybody in the northern part of the city would go to Pennachuck. Everyone in the southern tier would go to the new school. If the Board of Ed, who is responsible for redistricting, redistricts by geographically.
Okay. For the architects, I have a question about the special education piece of this. I have worked as a secretary at the high school in special ed, and I do have concerns, just as your speech language pathologist was saying, that maybe you need to spend some time actually sitting in the special education areas to see how they work and to understand what they would like to have instead. The fact of the matter is that in the medical side, which I'd spent a lot of time in, and in the school area, there's never enough money and there's never enough space. And people have dreams, and they've had dreams for years about how they would like their space to work. And if you ask them, they would be very vocal about what their desires would be. And the fact of the matter is that special ed is a very different thing from what it was even 5 years ago. And the amount of children that we have with very severe impairments is high. And some of the folks, I mean, Nashua School District is known, I think, pretty widely as being a good special ed program. We also have, children who come here to the children's home, and they get placed in our district because of that. And there are a lot of needs for these children, both equipment and personnel-wise, and it changes from year to year based on the children who are making up the classroom. And so the flexibility of the space is imperative.
Absolutely, and appreciate that very much. And just to inform folks, what we've done right now is just draw this space that allocates square footage to the programs. We will actually go and meet with all of them and spend time in their spaces as we get into the detailed design. So that we actually think that's the absolute right thing to do, is to understand their needs, and the best way to do it is to be right in there while they're working.
The special needs students will be addressed. When we first did the look through the various schools, and I saw that they were having those meetings in a closet, that's when I said,
We can't have a meeting, there's not enough room.
but even meeting with a single student in a closet, to me, was unacceptable. And that's part of the charter they have in designing, is to make sure that we have the adequate spaces to do right by our special needs students. The special needs wing at the new middle school was put together by the superintendent, and we can only address the middle school students, grades 1 through 5 and high school, separate program, not part of this project.
Also, just some clarifying notes around that. So when there's mention of the special education wing, that, what I think is being talked about, is primarily to accommodate out-of-district students that are placed there now. There are still many special education programs in the district that are already planned as part of integrated into the rest of the classroom. So there's no segregation of special education by a wing. There's a very, very intensive program that for out-of-district students that is proposed to be together. But there's, by and large, there's a great deal of the special education program that gets distributed throughout the building itself. And so just again, there's a little bit of clarification. And the other thing that we try to do is take advantage of the fact that we're building a new school. So the intensive needs students in those spaces that serve those intensive needs students, the intent was to move those to the new school so that we can purposefully build spaces to support them instead of the retrofit spaces where many of them are now, because they were in school spaces that were never designed for their needs.
The other thing is that anytime we touch a school, we have to bring it up to ADA standards, and there's going to be a number of doors that are going to be affected and other accesses, because that's a requirement once you touch a school for the retrofit. And of course, the new school would be compliant.
Yeah, and there's all the special ed buses, which are a factor as well. We have currently a separate location for those to rotate through so that the paras can pick up all the students. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rizwana. I live on 10 Medallion Court, so I'm the last house. I actually am not going to repeat the same concerns and questions. I'm pretty much convinced, and I really want to say whatever concerns has been brought up were my initial concerns. I sent you a list of my concerns.
Yes, we've talked email many times.
Exactly. So thank you for your response. One of the things that I think I did mention in my email that I would like to bring it again, why we are building another school in this area when we already have so many schools within 2 miles of the radius. We have, I'm not counting just public schools, I'm also counting private schools because that also causes traffic. They don't have public transportation, but they do have private transportation. So we have Bicentennial, we have New Sierras, we have World Academy, we will have, that's how it sounds like, the middle school. We have Maine Dunstable Elementary School. We have Second Nature Academy down the road. Why another school in this zone? So that's one of my biggest concerns, which pretty much, reiterates the concern for traffic. And the road, which is very narrow, the Buck Meadow Road. I drive every morning. I have to leave. I work in a hospital, so I have to leave at 5 in the morning. And sometimes I have to, it's not safe. And with middle school and then with all the elementary schools, we'll have traffic, not for just 2 hours or in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon. We'll have constant traffic pretty much throughout the day.
Okay. As far as the middle school being located down here, we have 2 middle schools right now that are within a mile or 2 of each other, and they're both center city. This will segregate them into the 3 sectors so that people aren't having to go as far to go to the middle school. We have 18 public schools in the school system, plus all the ones you mentioned, the private schools. So there are a number of places that have multiple schools. Up near Holman Stadium, there's the Amherst Street, Mount Pleasant, Charlotte, they're all very close. So, what?
In St. Chris.
St. Chris?
Yeah.
Pennachuck? So, I mean, it's not the only area that has a lot of schools. And the other thing is that this particular lot was set aside 22 years ago by the developer for a school. It was actually, I believe that Brian McCarthy was involved in it when they planned this whole area out, that would be a school.
I agree with you, but just giving a rationale that on certain areas we have multiple schools doesn't justify the reason to build the school and cause the same problem. Has anyone, I have been living in the United States for 15 years, but this is the first time I'm ever involved in some form of school meeting. For me, this is a very new process. I'm not familiar with it, how all these things get started and how it works. But my concern is that I'm looking more from the quality side. Have we learned any lessons from those systems where we already have multiple schools within close distance? Are there any disadvantages? Are there any safety issues that we are going to be repeating again if we're going to? Because I don't know if that enough is justifiable to build another school within such a close.
Fairgrounds is the worst case, where we have an elementary school right across the street from the middle school. And as part of this project, we're taking several steps to improve the traffic on Cleveland Street so that it's much safer. We're addressing the 3 middle schools, and because they were all in need of significant repair and security upgrades. We don't talk a lot about the security upgrades because of the fact that they're security. But all the schools in Nashua will have security upgrades, and we're working on them right now as a separate project. but both Fairgrounds, Pennachuck, and obviously the new school will have increased security that makes it much safer for the students that are going there.
Okay. There's just something in me just telling me this decision has been made already. You know, like through my email conversations and still, you know, we're just planning. There's a lot of concern. I just feel like transparency in the communication is a big issue that was my first point that I mentioned. And I think a lot of people echoed the same thing, that we were not aware about this project and what's happening. When we bought the house, we moved from Lebanon into 2015, and we were looking for the house. We were looking for the perfect house. We even went a little over budget than our pocket allowed us because we loved the neighborhood. We wanted that peace. We wanted that, you know, environment for our kids and for our family to grow. Unfortunately, and again, I'm not saying there is a need, absolutely, and we have to look at the comprehensive need, not just, you know, but there's a lot of families that are going to be affected by this. You know, again, safety, transportation, to me, traffic is big concern. That I don't know how, I'm not an architect, I'm not an engineer, but in my head, when I just kind of map this thing, it doesn't fit somehow. It just doesn't fit that it's gonna work because the school is not there and still there's safety issues, you know. We have so many kids standing for, waiting for the bus on Cherrywood Drive, on the Ridge Road, you know, on Buck Meadow. So I don't know. There may be, you know, maybe things will clear up more, or maybe not. But I just feel like I don't know if I will or, you know, all these people will ever get a clear answer how. And once it's done, once it's made, it's too late, probably. So.
Once it's built? Yeah.
Thank you.
The other thing is that it's replacing Elm Street. Elm Street is 84 years old. My grandfather helped design and build it. And that school, if we try to upgrade it to continue to use it as a school, would be an additional minimum $15 million more than building a new school, and it wouldn't meet any of the middle school requirements that we have. And the traffic there is far worse than anything around here. We've had a couple of students hit around Elm Street. There's absolutely not enough parking. If you look at the thick report that was done by Harriman, you'll find all of those concerns were brought up. It's just not conducive for a school anymore, and it's not conducive definitely for a middle school. It was built as a high school, and that was 84 years ago.
I absolutely agree with you, and I think I have kids, and it's concerning if, you know, it does. It's just, we need to explore. I just feel like I don't know if we explored more than this, if we explored more options to build school. That's my concern. I'm absolutely, you know, kids' safety is the prime thing, importance, but that doesn't mean we have to ignore, or it's just, I don't know what's the best way to say it, but I feel like the communication, if we were informed, you know, like of all these things before, to me, this decision has been made already, so I don't know what's the point. I was even hesitant to come. My husband didn't want to come. He said the decision is already made. Now, somebody contacted me from a realtor agency looking to sell my house. And I said, no, you know, I don't want to. It's like, do you know they're building a school? I said, yeah, but that's in the planning phase. You know, the decision hasn't been made. She said, no, the decision has been made. People don't know that. I don't know who to trust. I just don't know who to trust, especially for me. Like, I'm not born and brought up here. I just moved a few years ago. So for me, it's very challenging, you know. For me, it's the best, you know. In 2 years, my kid can just walk across, jump across the street and go to middle school. Like, I'll be in a best spot. But instead, I'm most concerned. Or I should not say that. There are a lot of people who are really concerned, so I'm equally concerned with them.
There are a significant number of steps that still have to be going through before it's final. And we haven't even done the detailed design either, so. And that detailed design will be worked out with all of the groups that have made inputs into the conceptual design. And we've been working, I know I've been communicating with you for months.
Yeah.
And that's why we are not doing anything on Medallion. And you have a very nice house, by the way.
Thank you.
And great location. So we're going to do everything we can to make it as, if we end up building the school, we'll try to have it to be the least impact to the neighborhood, safest for the kids, because that's the whole name of the game.
We trust. We'll look forward for, the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Howard Kaufman again. Could you please clarify the dates of construction? We heard that possibly the fall of 2020, yet I recall at this meeting, I think it was the previous meeting, you said you wanted to break ground in the spring of 2020, next spring, that we needed to urgently move forward so the construction folks could order equipment and whatever. So what is the break ground date?
You
Yes,
want to
well,
address
so,
that?
yeah, there are, remember, there are 3 projects.
For the new middle school.
Right, so for the, I'm speaking, so the new middle school requires still for a fair amount of design on our end. There may be aspects, and again, this is something we coordinate with the construction manager, Harvey, but there may be aspects that can get started beforehand, like the site, the contractors like to get the site work going sooner than the rest of the building design. And so there may be areas that we can get that piece off and going first. And so the idea of time is of the essence to them. The sooner they can get underground or going with the construction, the faster that they can sequence the rest of it. Our design is still going to take, because we have all the people, the stakeholders to meet with again to do the detailed design. So it's going to take us until next fall to finish the design of the new school. We still have the other fairgrounds in Pennachuck that will happen more quickly, and those will happen earlier next year.
Right. My question is about breaking ground at the new site. I recall, like I just said, that the spring, so they can get in and start the road work or site prep, whatever they have to do. Is that still the case? That spring is intended?
It's the intent that, if all goes well, that the access road would have to be built first, and then they will have to do some tree cutting and some land movement and all of that well in advance of before they ever put a shovel in the ground for building anything. So that would get done ahead. There are reasons for getting it done ahead, and that's what we're following.
Right, but I haven't still heard. This meeting, previously, I believe you said the intent is to try and break ground in the spring so the road folks can get started on the site prep. Is that still is spring still an intended target?
It's going to be up to Harvey, and they're not here tonight, so.
Do you recall what you said at the last meeting? Can you share what you said previously?
The intent was to get the access road and the tree clearing done in the spring.
Thank you very much.
Doris Owens again. I have a question about enrollment. Over the last 10 years, we've lost almost 2,000 students. We had 13,000 in the district, and now we have 11,000. So at the rate that we've been losing 180 students a year, over the next 10 years, that's another 1,800 students. So that would be 450 to 500 less middle school students, or 150 to 170 per building. So is that being taken into account? Even in the next 2 years, we'll have 90 less middle school students. This is why that feasibility study and that statistical enrollment report was so critical, because are we building for the population we have or the population we're expected to have? I mean, they're two different things.
You're talking about population study and students, that's all falls in the Board of Ed, and we're getting the information from your superintendent, so.
Well, state law requires that there's a statistically reliable report on when you're building a new school, and I haven't seen that. So I don't know if there's a superintendent who's doing it, but it hasn't happened. So how do we project that we need 800 students per building if we don't have that report and we don't have numbers?
Kim McGurk, 72 Charlotte Ave. I'm speaking not as a school district employee now, but I want to speak to all of you who live in that area. I'm going to talk to you as a resident. I've owned 10 houses in Nashua. I've lived in 6 of them. All 6 houses I've lived in have been within rock-throwing distance from a school, either Mount Pleasant or Charlotte Avenue, twice, or Pennachuck Middle School. I'm here to tell you that your concerns about noise and traffic are not based in my experience. School traffic is episodic, happens at the beginning of school and at the end of school, and it's over amazingly quickly. School noise is also episodic. When Mrs. Hohensee and I are neighbors who lived in the North End for many years and could hear everything that went on at Greeley Park. Then I moved further north, and my property backed up to the Pennachuck Middle School. I could hear, when I sat on my porch, the football practice at night from the Young Children's League, and on the days I didn't work, I heard occasionally our announcements from Pennachuck, or I heard our Pennachuck band practicing outdoors. When I have twice lived literally across the street from the Charlotte Ave School. If I'm home, I hear the lovely noise of recess going on. I see traffic from, here's an interesting fact. My first house across the street from the Charlotte Ave School from 72 to 76, I never saw people parking in front of my house, which was 3 doors away. Now I live about 10 houses away, and times have changed so much that children never walk to school, and parents' cars block our entire neighborhood until they pick up their school. And I've never quite understood why parents come an hour early and sit in the car with the car running to pick up their children. So the traffic problem is not school buses. I move around as head of the department in a lot of schools as they're emptying out. I've always wanted to video the incredible ballet of the high schools ending their day and all those buses leaving. The entire ballet is over in 15 minutes. So the idea that there is traffic blocking either Broad Street or West Hollow Street for a lengthy time is not so. It just isn't the experience. If you live near a park, you hear what goes on at the park. We, all of us, some of you live in a little bit more rural area of the city than those of us who live in the center part of the city. But this is not Hollis. I lived in Hollis on 4 acres of land. I couldn't wait to get someplace that was a little bit noisier. So I think your concerns about school noise are not founded in fact. And school traffic, bus traffic, you get bus traffic already. I am always amazed that right now at Pennachuck, school ends at 2:43, and by 3 o'clock, we are a wasteland of nothing but faculty cars. It's gone. The traffic is over. And there is no noise other than children playing or an occasional night event. So, I mean, the school has to go someplace. There is no room in the center of the city. And in fact, your neighborhood is the biggest and newest developed area of the city. I would welcome a school, but there's not noise and there's not traffic. I suggest you all go and watch Nashua High School South empty out at the end of the day, or the other high school. Those are the 2 biggest places emptying out, and it doesn't take long, and it doesn't preclude your moving around the city. I just think that as somebody who has lived here for well over 50 years and lived in near schools all the time, your concerns about traffic and noise are really unfounded.
Yeah, so Amit Dhani, 118 Cherrywood Drive, and I guess I just want to raise this concern on behalf of Cherrywood Drive. I hope what she said holds true, but I'm not sure about that yet. But my concern is about the emergency access road in the back. What if the many cars comes and line up and drop the kids off around that emergency vehicle, that access road, and they start walking that side, So I don't want the cars to just pile up, make a traffic on a Cherrywood Drive, waiting up there to drop off the kids on the back road, you know. And they just, it's kind of nightmare, and the kids walking through that street, you know, which is right now very livelihood, you know, the quiet street, now it's going to turn into a bit nightmare. That's my concern.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anyone that hasn't spoken that would like to come up and ask a question? Seeing none, I want to thank you all for coming out this evening. I was glad that we were able to have you here and address some of your questions, and hopefully all of the answers will appear on the question and answer portion of the website. And if you want to see some of the drawings, Harriman has the drawings over here.